Sarah's phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Another ride request. She'd been driving for Uber for 3 months now, working the late shift to make ends meet after losing her day job. The pickup location was in the warehouse district, not unusual for weekend nights when the clubs let out. She pulled up to the address, a dimly lit corner where streetlights flickered intermittently. A man emerged from the shadows, tall and gaunt, wearing a dark coat that seemed too heavy for the warm September evening. His face was obscured by the brim of a baseball cap. "Marcus." Sarah called through her partially lowered window. "That's me," he replied, his voice oddly monotone. He slid into the back seat without another word. Sarah glanced at her GPS. The destination was about 20 minutes away, deep in the suburbs. She'd never been to that particular address before, but the neighborhood was decent enough. As she pulled away from the curb, she tried to make conversation. "How's your night going?" Silence. She adjusted her rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of her passenger. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. Something about his posture made her uneasy, too rigid, too controlled. "Music okay?" she asked, gesturing toward the radio. "Turn it off." His tone wasn't rude, but there was something final about it that made Sarah comply immediately. The car fell into an uncomfortable quiet, filled only by the hum of tires on asphalt and the distant sounds of the city fading behind them. As they drove deeper into residential areas, Sarah noticed Marcus had begun to lean forward slightly, as if studying the back of her head. She could feel his eyes on her, intense and unwavering. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "So, what do you do for work?" she attempted again, hoping to break the tension. "I collect things." "Oh, like what kind of things?" "Personal items." "Very personal." The way he emphasized the word personal sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She glanced in the mirror again and froze. Marcus was no longer wearing his cap, and his face was fully visible now. His skin was pale, almost translucent, with dark circles under his eyes that looked more like bruises than exhaustion. But it was his smile that made her blood run cold, too wide, with teeth that seemed too sharp. "You have beautiful hair," he said suddenly. "I've been watching you for weeks." Sarah's heart pounded. "Excuse me?" "Every Tuesday and Friday night, you work this route. You always park at the 7-Eleven on Maple Street for your break. You drink coffee black, no sugar. You call your mother every night at midnight." Terror crept up Sarah's throat. She pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to reach the destination and end this ride. But as she looked at the GPS, she realized something was wrong. The address he'd given her led to an industrial area that had been abandoned for years. No houses, no apartments, just empty factories and condemned buildings. "Where exactly am I taking you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Home," Marcus replied simply. Sarah made a split-second decision. At the next intersection, instead of turning right toward the destination, she yanked the steering wheel left toward the nearest police station. But as she turned, she felt something cold and sharp press against the back of her neck. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Marcus whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "You see, Sarah, yes, I know your name. I've been planning this for a very long time. Your hair is going to look beautiful in my collection." Sarah's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to think. The police station was still 10 minutes away, but there was a 24-hour diner just ahead. She could cause a scene, get attention. She slammed on the brakes without warning, causing Marcus to lurch forward. In that split second, she threw the car into park, unbuckled her seatbelt, and lunged for the door handle. But Marcus was faster. His hand clamped down on her wrist with inhuman strength. Now, Sarah. Let's not make this difficult." But Sarah had one advantage he hadn't counted on. She'd installed a panic button under her dashboard after reading horror stories online about drivers being attacked. Her free hand found the button and pressed it hard. Within seconds, her phone began broadcasting her location to the police and emitting a high-pitched alarm. Marcus recoiled at the sound, momentarily loosening his grip. Sarah wrenched free and stumbled out of the car, screaming for help. The diner's lights blazed just 50 yards away. She ran, not daring to look back, until she burst through the glass doors and collapsed at the feet of a startled waitress. When the police arrived 5 minutes later, they found Sarah's car empty, doors wide open. Marcus was gone, as if he'd simply vanished into the night. But in the back seat, they found something that made even the veteran officer's stomachs turn. A small wooden box filled with locks of hair in different colors and textures, each tied with a ribbon and labeled with a woman's name and date. Sarah never drove for Uber again. But sometimes, late at night, she still receives ride requests from a user named Marcus. The pickup location is always the same warehouse district corner where she first met him. The destination changes, but it's always somewhere isolated, somewhere no one would think to look. She never accepts those rides, but she can't help wondering about the drivers who do. Jake had been driving for Uber for 2 years, and he thought he'd seen everything. Drunk college students, crying heartbreak victims, silent business travelers, the full spectrum of human experience crammed into the backseat of his Honda Civic. But the passenger he picked up at 3:17 a.m. on a foggy Thursday morning was different. The ride request came from apartment complex 4B on Riverside Drive. Jake knew the building well. It was one of those converted warehouses that hipsters loved, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures. He picked up riders there dozens of times before. But when he arrived, the building looked wrong somehow. The usual warm glow from the windows was absent, leaving the structure dark and imposing against the fog-shrouded night. Only one light was visible, a flickering fluorescent in what Jake assumed was the fourth-floor hallway. His phone buzzed with a message from the passenger, "Coming down now." Jake waited, engine idling, wipers sweeping intermittently across his windshield to clear the condensation. The fog was unusually thick for October, turning the street into a gray tunnel of limited visibility. He could barely make out the building's entrance 20 feet away. A figure emerged from the mist, moving with an odd, shuffling gait. As the person approached, Jake could see it was a woman in her 30s, wearing a vintage dress that looked like it belonged in the 1950s. Her hair was styled in perfect victory rolls, and her lips were painted deep red. She looked like she'd stepped out of an old Hollywood movie. "Eleanor?" Jake called out as she reached for the rear door handle. "That's right, honey," she replied, sliding into the seat behind him. Her voice had a strange quality to it, like an old recording played through static. "Thanks for picking me up so late." Jake glanced at the destination on his phone, Riverside Cemetery. He'd driven people to cemeteries before, usually grieving relatives or gothic teenagers trying to impress their friends. But something about this felt different. "No problem," he said, pulling away from the curb. "Kind of a spooky time for a cemetery visit, though." Eleanor laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Oh, I'm a night owl. Always have been. Besides, it's peaceful there at this hour. No crowds, no noise. Just me and the residents." The way she said residents made Jake glance in his rearview mirror. Eleanor sat primly in the center of the back seat, hands folded in her lap, staring out the window with a small smile. In the dim light from the dashboard, her skin looked almost translucent. "So what do you do there?" Jake asked, trying to make conversation. "Research? Photography? I visit friends," Eleanor replied simply. "Old friends who can't come to me anymore." The fog seemed to thicken as they drove, forcing Jake to slow down and squint through the windshield. The familiar streets looked alien and distorted, as if the mist was transforming the entire city into something from another era. "This fog is crazy," Jake muttered, leaning forward to see better. "I love it," Eleanor said. "It reminds me of home. Of the way things used to be." "Where's home?" "Here and there. Mostly there these days." Jake tried to parse that cryptic answer, but something else was bothering him. Despite having a passenger in the back seat, his car felt strangely empty. Usually he could sense another person's presence. Their breathing, small movements, the subtle shift in the car's balance. But with Eleanor it was as if he was driving alone. He glanced in the mirror again and froze. The back seat appeared empty. But Eleanor's voice continued, clear as before. "Take the next left, honey. There's a shortcut I know." Jake's hands began to shake on the steering wheel. He looked over his shoulder, craning his neck to see the back seat directly. Nothing. But when he looked back at the mirror, Eleanor was there again, smiling serenely. "You seem nervous," she observed. "First time driving to a cemetery?" "No, I've been there before." Jake's voice came out as a whisper. Are you really back there?" Eleanor's laughter filled the car again, but this time it sounded more like wind through dead leaves. "Of course I am, silly. Where else would I be?" The GPS indicated they were approaching the cemetery, but Jake couldn't see it through the fog. Everything looked the same, gray, formless, endless. He was beginning to wonder if they were still in the same city, or if the fog had somehow transported them to another realm entirely. "Stop here," Eleanor said suddenly. Jake looked around. They were on a narrow road he didn't recognize, surrounded by tall iron gates that materialized from the mist like teeth. The cemetery entrance was nowhere in sight, but somehow he knew they were in the right place. "This isn't the main entrance," he said. "It's my entrance," Eleanor replied. I always use the old gate. Turn off the engine. Against his better judgment, Jake complied. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle tick of the cooling engine and the distant sound of nothing. No traffic, no wind, no night sounds at all. Thank you for the ride, honey, Eleanor said. You're very kind. Most drivers won't come here at this hour. Most drivers. Oh yes, I take this ride often. Usually on foggy nights like this. It's the only time I can manage the trip. Jake heard the door handle click, followed by the soft thud of the door closing. He spun around to look at the back seat, but it was empty. Eleanor was gone. Through the fog, he could just make out a figure in a vintage dress walking toward the iron gates, which swung open silently at her approach. He fumbled for his phone to end the ride, but when he opened the app, there was no record of Eleanor's trip. No pickup, no destination, no fare. According to his phone, he'd been parked outside apartment complex 4B for the past 20 minutes, engine running. Confused and shaken, Jake drove back to the apartment building. The fog was beginning to lift, revealing the familiar cityscape he knew so well. The building at 4B looked normal again, warm light glowing from several windows. But as he sat there trying to make sense of what had happened, a maintenance worker approached his car. "You okay, buddy?" the man asked. "You've been sitting here for a while." "I just dropped someone off," Jake replied. "A woman from apartment 4B. The maintenance worker frowned. 4B? That unit's been empty for 3 months. Owner moved out after his girlfriend died in that car accident. Strange thing though, sometimes people still report seeing lights up there or hearing music from the 1950s. Building management keeps checking, but there's never anyone there." Jake's blood turned to ice. What was the girlfriend's name? Eleanor something. Real vintage type, always dressed like she was from another era. Died on a foggy night just like this one, actually. Car went off the road on her way to visit her grandmother's grave at Riverside Cemetery. Jake stared up at the 4th floor of the building. In the window of apartment 4B, he could swear he saw a figure in a vintage dress waving goodbye. His phone buzzed with a new ride request. The pickup location was apartment 4B. The passenger's name was Eleanor. Maria had been looking forward to this night out for weeks. After pulling double shifts at the hospital for 3 months straight, she finally had a weekend off and plans to meet her college friends at their favorite downtown club. She'd spent an hour getting ready, the perfect dress, makeup, hair, and felt beautiful for the first time in months. The Uber arrived right on time, a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver, David according to the app, had a 4.9-star rating and over 3,000 rides completed. Maria felt safe as she slid into the back seat and confirmed their destination, the Velvet Room on 5th Street. "Running late?" David asked as they pulled away from her apartment complex. He was middle-aged with graying hair and kind eyes in the rearview mirror. "Just a little," Maria replied, checking her phone. "My friends are already there, but they won't mind waiting." The conversation flowed easily as they drove through the familiar streets of downtown. David was a retired teacher who drove on weekends to supplement his pension. He had grandchildren Maria's age and spoke about them with obvious pride. Maria relaxed, glad to have gotten a driver who seemed genuinely nice instead of the usual silent or overly chatty types. But after about 10 minutes, Maria noticed they weren't headed toward 5th Street. Instead, David had taken them into an older part of the city she rarely visited, narrow streets lined with industrial buildings and warehouses. "Are we taking a detour?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Traffic must be bad on the main roads." "Oh yes," David replied, his tone unchanged. "There's construction on 5th. This route will get us there faster, I promise." Maria checked her phone's GPS, but the signal was weak in this part of town. She could see they were moving generally in the right direction, so she tried to relax. Still, something felt off. The streets were getting progressively more isolated, and she hadn't seen another car for several minutes. "How much longer do you think?" she asked. "Not long now, sweetheart." The endearment made Maria uncomfortable. David's voice had subtly changed, becoming softer and more intimate. She glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror and noticed he was watching her more intently than before. They turned down another narrow street, this one lined with abandoned storefronts and empty lots. Maria's anxiety spiked. This definitely wasn't the way to 5th Street. "I think we might be lost," she said, her voice firmer now. "Can you check your GPS?" "GPS." David chuckled. "I've been driving these streets for 40 years, honey. I know exactly where we're going." Maria's heart began to race. She opened her phone's map app, but they were in a dead zone with no cell service. The familiar blue dot that showed her location had disappeared entirely. "I need you to turn around," she said, no longer trying to hide her concern. "Take me back to a main road. I'll get out there and call another driver." "Now why would you want to do that?" David asked, and when Maria looked up, she saw he was smiling at her in the mirror. But it wasn't the same kind smile from before. This one was predatory, calculating. "We're almost to our destination." "Our destination is the Velvet Room on 5th Street, Maria said firmly. "No, sweetheart. That's where you thought you were going. But I have somewhere much more private in mind. Somewhere we can get to know each other better." Maria's hand shot to the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Child safety locks. She was trapped. "Let me out of this car right now," she demanded, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "I'm afraid I can't do that," David replied calmly. "You see, I've been watching you for weeks. Every time you leave for work, every time you come home. You're always so tired, so stressed. I thought you could use some relaxation." The car slowed as they approached what looked like an abandoned warehouse complex. Maria could see a loading dock with a roll-up door that stood partially open, revealing only darkness beyond. In that moment, Maria remembered something her self-defense instructor had taught her. If someone is trying to take you to a second location, fight like your life depends on it, because it probably does. As David began to turn toward the loading dock, Maria made her move. She threw herself forward between the front seats, grabbing for the steering wheel. The car swerved violently as David tried to maintain control while fighting her off. "Stop it!" he yelled, no longer sounding like the kindly grandfather from minutes before. "You're going to get us both killed." Maria didn't care. She'd rather crash than find out what David had planned for her in that warehouse. She managed to get her hands on the wheel and yanked it hard to the left. The car jumped the curb and crashed into a chain-link fence, the impact throwing them both forward. Dazed but alive, Maria scrambled over the center console and out the driver's side door while David was still stunned by the airbag deployment. She ran without looking back, her heels clicking frantically on the broken asphalt. Behind her, she could hear David shouting, but his voice was growing fainter. She kept running until she reached a main road where blessed streetlights and traffic meant safety and witnesses. A police car was the first to stop when they saw her waving frantically from the roadside. When they returned to the crash site 20 minutes later, they found David's car empty, the driver's door still hanging open. David was nowhere to be found. But in the trunk, police discovered a collection that made the veteran officers sick. Women's shoes, jewelry, and cell phones. Dozens of them. And a notebook filled with names, addresses, and detailed observations about women's daily routines. Maria's name was on the last page, along with her work schedule and the note. Perfect candidate. Trusting nature. Lives alone. No boyfriend to report her missing immediately. David was never found, despite a massive manhunt. But 3 months later, a woman in the next city reported a similar experience with an Uber driver who didn't match his photo and tried to take her to an abandoned building instead of her destination. She had been smart enough to jump out at a red light. The driver's name in the app was Michael. But when police investigated, they found the same notebook in his abandoned car, with David's handwriting and a new list of potential victims. Maria never took another Uber alone at night. And she tells every woman she meets the same thing her experience taught her. Sometimes the person with the highest rating and the kindest smile is the one you should fear the most. Trust your instincts. They might be the only thing standing between you and becoming a name in someone's notebook. Alex loved driving at night. There was something peaceful about the empty streets, the gentle hum of the engine, and the soft glow of dashboard lights. As a graduate student working on his thesis, the late-night Uber shifts provided both the income he needed and the quiet thinking time that helped him process his research. The pickup request came in at 2:43 a.m. from the historic district downtown. The passenger's name was Catherine, and she needed to go to Hillcrest Avenue, a residential area about 15 minutes away. Alex accepted the ride and headed toward the pickup location, a Victorian-era apartment building that had been converted into upscale lofts. Catherine was waiting on the sidewalk when he arrived, a woman in her late 20s with long dark hair and vintage clothing that looked expensive. She carried herself with an old-fashioned elegance that reminded Alex of actresses from classic films. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said as she settled into the back seat. Her voice was soft and cultured, with just a hint of an accent Alex couldn't quite place. "No problem," Alex replied, pulling away from the curb. "I was in the area anyway." As they drove through the quiet streets, Alex found himself glancing frequently in the rearview mirror. Catherine was strikingly beautiful in an otherworldly way, with pale skin that seemed to glow in the street light that filtered through the windows. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, looking out at the passing city with a wistful expression. "Beautiful night," Alex offered, trying to make conversation. "Yes," Catherine agreed. "I love this time of night. Everything is so peaceful, so honest. People wear masks during the day, but in the darkness, truth has a way of revealing itself." There was something philosophical about her words that intrigued Alex. "That's an interesting way to look at it. Are you a writer or something?" Catherine smiled, and for a moment, Alex's breath caught. Her smile was radiant, transforming her entire face. "I suppose you could say I'm a student of human nature. I've had a lot of time to observe people." "What kind of observations?" "Well," Catherine said, leaning forward slightly, "take you for example. You're intelligent. I can tell by the books in your front seat and the way you speak. You're probably in school, graduate level. You drive at night because you need the money, but also because you enjoy the solitude. You're introspective, maybe a little lonely." Alex was impressed despite himself. "That's pretty accurate. What gave me away?" "Your eyes," Catherine said simply. "I can see a lot in someone's eyes. Yours are kind but guarded. You've been hurt before, so you keep people at a distance." Alex glanced in the mirror again, meeting Catherine's gaze. For a split second, he felt disoriented, as if he was looking into infinite depths. Then she looked away and the moment passed. "What about you?" Alex asked. "What do your eyes say about you?" "That's a dangerous question," Catherine replied with a laugh. "Some things are better left unexamined." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, but Alex found himself increasingly fascinated by his passenger. Every time he looked in the mirror, he discovered some new detail about her appearance. The antique cameo brooch at her throat, the way her hair seemed to move even though the windows were closed, the strange luminescence of her skin. "Can I ask you something?" Alex said as they turned onto Hillcrest Avenue. "Of course. This might sound weird, but do you feel cold back there? I can turn up the heat if you want." Catherine's reflection smiled at him in the mirror. "I'm always cold these days. But thank you for asking." Alex was about to respond when he realized something that made his blood freeze. Throughout the entire ride, he had been looking at Catherine in his rearview mirror. He could see her clearly, every detail of her face and clothing. But now, as he glanced quickly over his shoulder to look at the back seat directly, he saw nothing. The back seat was empty. Heart pounding, Alex looked back at the mirror. Catherine was there, still smiling at him with those luminous eyes. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice as clear as ever. Alex's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Where are you?" "I'm right here, silly. In the back seat." Alex looked over his shoulder again. Empty. Back to the mirror. Catherine, solid and real as anything. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "What isn't possible?" Catherine's voice carried a note of genuine concern. "You're starting to worry me, Alex. How do you know my name? I never told you my name." Catherine's expression in the mirror became sad, almost pitying. "Oh, Alex, you're beginning to understand, aren't you?" "Understand what?" "Look at yourself." Alex looked down at his hands on the steering wheel. They were translucent, fading in and out like old film. His chest, his legs, everything was becoming insubstantial, ghostly. "This isn't real," he said, his voice beginning to echo strangely. "This can't be real." "I'm afraid it is," Catherine said gently. "Do you remember what happened before you started driving tonight?" Alex tried to think, but his memories felt like vapor, slipping away every time he tried to grasp them. There had been rain. Yes, rain. And headlights. And the terrible sound of metal grinding against metal. "The accident," he whispered. "Yes. 3 hours ago on Highway 9. You were coming home from the library when that drunk driver ran the red light." The memories flooded back now, brutal and clear. The impact, the spinning, the moment when his car flipped and everything went dark. The last thing he remembered was the paramedics working frantically over his body while he watched from above, somehow separate from the broken form on the stretcher. "Am I?" "Yes," Catherine said softly. "But it's not so bad, is it? You're still doing what you love, driving through the quiet night, thinking, observing. Some of us have been doing this for decades." Alex looked in the mirror and saw Catherine clearly, but he also saw something else now. Behind her, the back seat was filled with other figures, men and women in clothing from different eras, all translucent, all watching him with understanding eyes. "We're all drivers," Catherine explained. "All of us died while working and somehow we just kept going. The city needs its night drivers and we need the city." It's not such a terrible existence. But the passengers, the people I've been picking up. Oh, they're real, Catherine assured him. Very real. And they need rides just like always. The only difference is that now you can see both worlds, the living and the in-between. Alex felt a strange sense of peace settling over him. The panic was fading, replaced by acceptance and even a kind of relief. No more worries about money, about school, about the future. Just the eternal night shift, carrying people safely through the darkness. Will I see you again? He asked. Catherine smiled. We're all part of the same route now, Alex. We take care of each other and we take care of the living. It's not such a bad purpose to have. The GPS announced that they had arrived at their destination. Alex pulled up to a modest house with warm light glowing in the windows. Catherine prepared to get out, but before she did, she reached forward and placed her hand on his shoulder. He could feel it, solid and reassuring. Welcome to the night shift, she said. Forever. As she walked toward the house, Alex realized he could see her directly now, not just in the mirror. She turned back once to wave and he saw that she wasn't alone. Dozens of other figures walked with her, all drivers, all carrying on their eternal vigil. Alex's phone buzzed with a new ride request. A living passenger this time, someone who needed to get home safely through the dark streets of the city. He accepted the ride and drove off into the night, finally understanding his true purpose. Death, it turned out, was just another shift change. Jessica had always been proud of her perfect 5.0 star rating as an Uber driver. In 8 months of driving, she'd completed over 2,000 rides without a single complaint. She was punctual, polite, kept her car spotless, and always had bottles of water and phone chargers available for passengers. Her secret was simple: treat every passenger like a VIP no matter what. That philosophy was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The ride request came in at 11:30 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. Pickup location: the Grand Hotel downtown. Destination: a residential address in the suburbs about 30 minutes away. The passenger's name was listed as R. Blackwood, and Jessica noticed this was a new user. No profile picture, no ride history visible. When she arrived at the hotel, a man in an expensive suit was waiting under the covered entrance. He was tall and thin, with silver hair and an ageless quality that could have put him anywhere between 40 and 60. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his perfectly tailored clothing to the way he carried himself. Ms. Rivera? He asked as he approached the car. That's me, Jessica replied with her usual bright smile. Mr. Blackwood? Indeed. He slid into the back seat with fluid grace. Thank you for the prompt service. As they pulled away from the hotel, Jessica began her usual routine of friendly conversation. How was your evening? Business or pleasure? A bit of both, Mr. Blackwood replied. His voice was cultured and smooth, with just a hint of an accent that Jessica couldn't identify. I was attending a gathering of like-minded individuals. Sounds interesting. What kind of work do you do? I evaluate people, he said simply. I determine their worth. Something in his tone made Jessica glance in the rearview mirror. Mr. Blackwood was sitting perfectly straight, hands folded, studying her with intense dark eyes that seemed to reflect the dashboard lights like an animal's. That sounds like an important job, Jessica said, trying to maintain her friendly demeanor despite a growing sense of unease. Oh, it is very important. You see, Jessica, may I call you Jessica? Most people don't realize they're being evaluated constantly. Every interaction, every choice, every moment of their lives is being observed and rated. I suppose that's true in a way, Jessica agreed, thinking of the rating system that governed her livelihood. Customer service is all about ratings these days. Mr. Blackwood leaned forward slightly. Tell me, what's your current rating on the platform? 5 stars, Jessica said with pride. Perfect rating since I started. Impressive. And how important is that rating to you? Very important. It's how I make my living. Drivers with low ratings get deactivated pretty quickly. Yes, I'm quite familiar with the system, Mr. Blackwood said. But what if I told you that there's another rating system? One that's far more comprehensive and consequential than anything Uber has devised. Jessica laughed, but it sounded forced even to her own ears. What do you mean? Every human being has a score, Jessica. A number that represents their true value, their kindness, their honesty, their worth as a person. Most people never see their score, never know they're being evaluated. But some of us are tasked with maintaining the system. The rain was getting heavier, making it difficult to see the road ahead. Jessica slowed down, focusing on driving, but she could feel Mr. Blackwood's eyes boring into the back of her head. "That's an interesting philosophy," she said carefully. "It's not philosophy. It's reality. Would you like to know your score, Jessica?" Every instinct told Jessica to deflect, to change the subject, but something about Mr. Blackwood's tone made refusal seem impossible. Sure. Currently, you're rated at 8.7 out of 10. Quite impressive, actually. You're kind to strangers, honest in your dealings, hardworking, and genuinely care about others' well-being. Most humans never break 7.0. Jessica felt a mixture of relief and absurdity. This was clearly some kind of weird game or philosophy this passenger was into. "That's good to know. However," Mr. Blackwood continued, and his voice took on a colder edge, "your score isn't fixed. It fluctuates based on your actions, particularly in moments of moral testing." Moral testing? For instance, what would you do if you discovered that a passenger had left something valuable in your car? Something worth, say, $50,000? Jessica glanced in the mirror again. "I'd return it, of course. That's just basic honesty. Even if you knew the passenger would never notice it was missing? Even if you desperately needed the money?" "Yes, definitely." "Interesting. Your score just increased to 8.8. But let me pose another scenario. What if you discovered that a passenger was wanted by the police for a serious crime? Would you turn them in?" The questions were getting more uncomfortable, but Jessica answered honestly. "I'd probably contact the authorities, yes. Even if the passenger claimed to be innocent? Even if they begged you not to?" I'd have to think about that one." "And now your score drops to 8.6. You see how quickly these things can change." Jessica's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and the familiar suburban roads looked alien and threatening in the storm. "Why are you asking me this?" she said. "Because tonight is your evaluation night, Jessica." "My what?" Mr. Blackwood pulled out an elegant leather notebook and began writing in it with an expensive-looking pen. Every few months, certain individuals are selected for comprehensive moral evaluation. Their responses to specific scenarios determine whether their score increases, decreases, or resets entirely. Resets to what? 0. Complete moral bankruptcy. Such individuals typically find that their luck changes quite dramatically afterward. Car accidents, job losses, relationship failures, health problems. It's remarkable how consistently life becomes difficult for people with 0 ratings. Jessica's blood ran cold. "This is insane. You're talking about some kind of supernatural judgment system?" "I prefer cosmic quality control," Mr. Blackwood said with a slight smile. "And we've arrived at your final test." Jessica looked around, confused. They were still 15 minutes from the destination according to her GPS, stopped at a red light in the middle of nowhere. The intersection was empty except for a single figure standing in the rain about 50 feet ahead. As the lightning flashed, Jessica could see it was a young woman, maybe 20 years old, drenched and shivering. "She's been waiting there for over an hour," Mr. Blackwood said quietly. "Her car broke down. She's called for help, but no one has come. She has no money for a ride, no friends or family in the area, and her phone battery is dying." Jessica squinted through the rain-streaked windshield. The girl looked desperate, probably freezing. "We should help her." "Should we?" Mr. Blackwood's voice was neutral. "Consider the facts. It's late at night. You don't know this person. She has no money to pay for the ride. Your passenger, me, has paid for a direct trip to the suburbs. Stopping would be a violation of your service agreement. But she needs help. Many people need help, Jessica. You can't save everyone. And consider this. What if she's not what she appears to be? What if this is a setup? What if helping her puts you in danger?" The light turned green, but Jessica didn't move. The girl had noticed their car and was walking toward them, hope visible on her face even through the rain. "Choose quickly," Mr. Blackwood said. "Your decision will determine your final score." Jessica's mind raced. Every fiber of her being told her to help the girl, but Mr. Blackwood's warnings echoed in her head. What if it was dangerous? What if this mysterious rating system was real, and making the wrong choice would destroy her life? The girl was at her window now, tapping gently. "Please," she called through the glass, "I just need to get to town. I'll pay you back, I promise." Jessica looked in the rearview mirror. Mr. Blackwood was watching her with those predatory eyes, pen poised over his notebook. "What happens if I help her?" Jessica asked. "That depends entirely on who you really are." Jessica took a deep breath and rolled down her window. "Get in," she told the girl. "We'll figure out the payment later." The girl's face lit up with relief and gratitude. Thank you so much. As the girl climbed into the front passenger seat, Jessica glanced back at Mr. Blackwood. His expression was unreadable. Interesting choice, he said quietly. What's my score now? Mr. Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, studying his notebook. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. It was warmer, more human. 9.2. The highest I've recorded in 5 years. Jessica felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. What happens now? Now you drive us all home safely, and you continue being the good person you've always been. He paused. Though I should mention, there is no cosmic rating system, Jessica. What? I'm a psychology professor at the university. I study moral decision-making under pressure. Your ride tonight was part of a research study. You gave consent when you signed up to drive. It was in the fine print. Jessica's hands shook on the steering wheel. You mean this was all fake? The rating system, yes. But your choices were real. Your kindness was real. And that young woman's need for help was very real. Jessica looked at her front passenger, who was warming her hands over the air vents. The girl caught her eye and smiled. Thank you again. You have no idea how much this means to me. As they drove through the storm, Jessica felt a strange mix of anger and relief. She'd been manipulated, yes, but she'd also learned something important about herself. When faced with a choice between self-preservation and helping someone in need, she'd chosen compassion. Her Uber rating remained perfect at 5.0 stars. But more importantly, she discovered that some ratings really do matter, the ones we give ourselves when no one else is watching. When she dropped off both passengers 30 minutes later, Mr. Blackwood handed her an extra $200 in cash. For your time, and for restoring my faith in human nature. Jessica never saw him again, but she never forgot the lesson. 6 months later, when she helped another stranded motorist on a lonely road, she didn't need anyone to tell her what her score was. She already knew. Marcus had been driving for Uber for 3 years, but he'd never taken a ride like the one that came through at 3:17 a.m. on Halloween night. He'd been about to call it quits for the evening when the notification pinged. $500 surge pricing, 40-minute trip to the old Millbrook Cemetery. Pick up at Sacred Heart Hospital. The money was too good to pass up, even if the destination gave him the creeps. Sacred Heart had been abandoned for 15 years, ever since the new medical center opened across town. The building sat like a concrete tombstone against the night sky, its broken windows staring down at the empty parking lot like dead eyes. Marcus had driven past it hundreds of times but never stopped. Tonight, a lone figure waited by the main entrance. She was elderly, maybe 70, dressed in a vintage nurse's uniform that looked like it belonged in a museum. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she carried an old-fashioned medical bag. As Marcus pulled up, she approached the car with a peculiar walking rhythm. 3 steps forward, pause, 3 steps forward, pause. You're my driver? She asked, peering through the passenger window with milky blue eyes. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Henderson? Marcus checked his phone for the passenger name. Nurse Henderson, she corrected, settling into the back seat with a soft grunt. I need to get to Millbrook Cemetery. There's been an emergency. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror as he pulled away from the hospital. An emergency at a cemetery? At 3 in the morning? Time doesn't stop for the dying young man, Nurse Henderson replied. Or for the dead. Something about the way she said it made Marcus's skin crawl, but he focused on the road ahead. The streets were empty except for a few other late-night drivers and the occasional drunk college students stumbling home from Halloween parties. So you're a nurse? Marcus asked, trying to make conversation. For 47 years, she replied. Started when I was 22, fresh out of nursing school. Worked the night shift at Sacred Heart until... She trailed off. Until it closed? Until I died. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced in the mirror again, but Nurse Henderson was staring out the window as if she hadn't said anything unusual. I'm sorry, what did you say? I said until I retired, she replied without looking at him. These old ears don't work like they used to. Marcus was sure that wasn't what she'd said, but he let it go. The Halloween atmosphere was probably just getting to him. They drove in silence for several minutes before Nurse Henderson spoke again. Tell me, Marcus, that is your name, isn't it? Do you believe in unfinished business? How do you know my name? Marcus hadn't introduced himself. It's on your driver card, dear. Right there on the dashboard. Marcus looked and sure enough, his ID was visible. But he could have sworn she'd said his name before she could have seen it. Unfinished business, she continued. Things left undone. Promises unkept. Debts unpaid. I guess so, Marcus said carefully. Why do you ask? Because some things can't rest until they're made right. Some people can't move on until they've settled their accounts. They were entering the older part of town now, where the street lights were fewer and the shadows deeper. Marcus noticed that every time they passed under a light, Nurse Henderson's reflection in the rearview mirror seemed to flicker, as if she wasn't quite solid. Are you feeling all right, Mrs. Nurse Henderson? Marcus asked. I'm fine, dear. Just thinking about old times. About patients I couldn't save. She paused, her voice growing distant. There was one in particular. Room 237. A young man about your age, actually. Car accident on Halloween night 23 years ago. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That's terrible. He was so frightened, Nurse Henderson continued. Kept asking if he was going to die. I held his hand and told him everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine, was it? He died at 3:17 a.m., still holding my hand. Marcus glanced at the clock on his dashboard. 3:35 a.m. Why are you telling me this? Because his name was Marcus too. The car swerved slightly as Marcus's concentration broke. That's just a coincidence. Is it? Marcus James Sullivan, born October 15, 1978. Lived at 247 Oak Street with his mother after his father left. Worked part-time at the auto shop downtown to help pay the bills. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Every detail was correct, but there was no way she could know those things. Who are you? I told you. I'm Nurse Henderson, and I have unfinished business. They were approaching Millbrook Cemetery now, its iron gates looming ahead like the entrance to another world. Marcus wanted to turn around, to drive away as fast as possible, but his hands seemed frozen on the steering wheel. Stop here, Nurse Henderson said as they reached the gates. Marcus parked the car but didn't turn off the engine. Look, I don't know what kind of game this is, but... Check your phone, Marcus. With trembling hands, Marcus looked at his phone. The ride request was still there, but as he watched, the passenger name began to change. Mrs. Henderson flickered and became M. Sullivan. Then the pickup location changed from Sacred Heart Hospital to room 237. This isn't possible, Marcus whispered. You've been driving the same route for 23 years, Marcus. Every Halloween night. Every time you think it's just another fare. But you never make it to the destination, do you? You always wake up in your car at dawn, thinking you dreamed it all. Marcus's mind reeled. He tried to remember the previous Halloween, the one before that. The memories were there, but they were hazy, like half-remembered dreams. And in each one he was driving this same route, picking up the same passenger. I don't understand. You died in that car accident, Marcus. But you were so worried about your mother, about the bills, about all the responsibilities you'd be leaving behind, that you couldn't let go. So you've been trying to make this one last delivery over and over again. Tears began streaming down Marcus's face. No, that's not possible. I have a life. I have an apartment. I have. Check your wallet. With shaking hands, Marcus pulled out his wallet. His driver's license was there, but the photo was wrong. It showed him at 19, not 43. The expiration date was October 31, 2001, 23 years ago. I tried to help you move on, Nurse Henderson said gently. Every year I've tried to explain. But you were never ready to listen until now. Why now? Because it's time, Marcus. Your mother passed away 2 years ago. The auto shop closed down. There's nothing left for you to worry about. It's time to let go. Marcus looked in the rearview mirror and saw that Nurse Henderson was beginning to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. What happens if I let go? You move on to whatever comes next. And so do I. I've been waiting all these years to help you cross over. It's my unfinished business too. Marcus sat in the car for a long moment, feeling the weight of 23 years of repetition. He thought about all the rides he'd taken, all the passengers he thought he'd helped, all the life he thought he'd been living. Will it hurt? No, dear. It's like going to sleep after a very, very long day. Marcus took a deep breath and turned off the engine. As soon as he did, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, the first real peace he'd felt in decades. Thank you, he said to Nurse Henderson, but when he turned around, she was gone. Marcus opened the car door and stepped out into the night. As he walked toward the cemetery gates, he felt himself becoming lighter, less substantial. Behind him, his car faded away like smoke. At the gates, he paused and looked back one last time at the road he'd traveled so many times. Then he turned and walked into the cemetery, where a warm light was waiting for him in the distance. The next morning, a groundskeeper found an old, rusted car in the cemetery parking lot. The license plates had expired in 2001, and there was no sign of a driver. When they checked the registration, they found it belonged to a Marcus Sullivan who had died in a car accident 23 years earlier. The car was towed away, but sometimes on Halloween night, people passing by Millbrook Cemetery swear they can still see headlights moving slowly along the old cemetery road. Nina had been driving for Uber for 6 months, and she prided herself on accepting every ride request that came her way. Single mom, 2 jobs, and student loans meant she couldn't afford to be picky. But when the request came in at 2:45 a.m. for a pickup at the Natural History Museum, she hesitated for the first time in her driving career. The museum had been closed for hours, and the pickup point was marked as the employee entrance in the back. The passenger name was listed simply as C. No profile picture, no rating history. But the fare was heading to the upscale Riverside district, a guaranteed good tip from someone with money. Nina needed the money more than she needed peace of mind. The museum district was eerily quiet as she navigated the empty streets. Streetlights cast long shadows between the imposing buildings, and her headlights seemed to barely penetrate the darkness ahead. When she pulled up to the employee entrance, a man was waiting with his back to her, studying something in his hands. He was tall and thin, wearing an expensive coat that looked like it belonged to another era. As he approached the car, Nina could see he was older, maybe 60, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Miss Chin?" His voice was cultured, precise. "That's me. You're C. Christopher," he said, settling into the back seat with careful movements. "Thank you for accommodating the unusual pickup location." Nina glanced in the rearview mirror as she pulled away from the museum. "Do you work there?" "In a manner of speaking. I acquire things for them. Rare items, unique pieces. Objects with interesting histories." "That sounds like fascinating work." Christopher smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It can be." "Tell me, Nina, you don't mind if I use your first name? What do you know about cursed objects?" Nina laughed nervously. "Like in movies? Haunted dolls and monkey paws?" "Precisely. Though most people assume such things are fiction. The reality is far more complex." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, no bigger than a jewelry case. "This, for instance, is quite real." "What is it?" "A music box. 18th century Italian craftsmanship. Beautiful workmanship." He traced patterns on the box's surface with one finger. "It belonged to a young girl named Elena who died of tuberculosis in 1892. Her parents claim she visited them every night after her death, asking them to wind her music box so she could dance." Nina kept her eyes on the road, but she could feel Christopher watching her reaction in the mirror. "That's creepy." The parents eventually went mad. They were found dead in their home, having apparently danced themselves to death. The music box was playing when the police arrived. Christopher's voice remained conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "It's been collected and studied for over a century. Every owner meets with interesting circumstances." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I find people's reactions to the supernatural quite illuminating. You, for instance, are trying very hard to remain skeptical, but your hands are gripping the steering wheel rather tightly." Nina forced herself to relax, but Christopher was right. Something about his calm description of these horrific events was deeply unsettling. "So you collect cursed objects for the museum?" "Not for the museum. For myself. I have a private collection. Quite extensive." He leaned forward slightly. "Would you like to see something truly remarkable?" Before Nina could answer, Christopher opened the music box. A delicate, tinkling melody began to play, a lullaby that seemed both beautiful and profoundly sad. But as the music played, Nina began to notice other sounds. Whispers so faint they might have been her imagination. The sound of footsteps that matched the rhythm of the melody. "Please close that," Nina said, her voice tighter than she intended. "In a moment. Listen carefully. Do you hear her?" Elena still dances to her music box. She's been dancing for over 100 years. The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nina's breath began to fog, and in the rearview mirror, she could swear she saw movement in the back seat, a small figure in a white dress spinning in circles. "Stop." Nina pulled over to the curb and turned around. Christopher was alone in the back seat, the music box closed in his hands. "What was that?" "What was what?" Christopher's expression was innocent, but his eyes held a predatory gleam. "I saw. There was a little girl." "Ah." Christopher nodded approvingly. "You're sensitive. That's quite rare. Most people can't see them at all. See what? The attached spirits. The entities bound to cursed objects. You have a gift, Nina? Nina's heart was racing. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I want you out of my car. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, I haven't just been collecting objects, Nina. I've been collecting people. What? Christopher reached into his other pocket and withdrew what looked like a small glass marble. But as Nina stared at it, she realized it wasn't glass. It contained something that moved, something that pressed against the boundaries of its prison like smoke trying to escape. This was my previous driver, Christopher said casually. Marcus. He was also sensitive like you. He could see the spirits, hear their voices. Unfortunately, he became uncooperative. So I had to add him to my collection. Nina lunged for her door, but it wouldn't open. She tried the windows, but they wouldn't roll down. Even her phone seemed to have lost all signal. The car is temporarily outside normal space, Christopher explained. A useful side effect of carrying so many supernatural artifacts. We're essentially in a pocket dimension until I decide to return us to the regular world. What do you want? I want you to work for me, Nina. Permanently. You'd be surprised how useful it is to have a driver who can sense supernatural activity. There are so many cursed objects in the world, and most of them are owned by people who don't appreciate their true value. And if I refuse? Christopher held up the marble containing Marcus. Then you join my collection in a more compact form. Nina looked around the car desperately. They were still sitting on what looked like a normal city street, but the world outside seemed frozen. Cars were stopped mid-motion, their headlights creating trails of light that hung in the air like solid objects. How long do I have to decide? Oh, you've already decided, Christopher said. The moment you opened your car door to let me in, you agreed to the contract. Didn't you read the terms of service when you signed up to drive? What are you talking about? Christopher pulled out his phone and showed her the Uber app. But the interface was wrong. Instead of normal ride details, it showed what looked like a contract written in languages she didn't recognize. At the bottom, in English, was a single line. Driver agrees to provide transportation services to supernatural entities and their collections, with compensation to be determined by the passenger. That's not what I agreed to. Reality is more flexible than most people realize, Christopher said. Especially for those of us who know how to manipulate it. Nina closed her eyes and tried to think. There had to be a way out of this. Christopher had mentioned that she was sensitive, that she could see things others couldn't. Maybe that sensitivity worked both ways. She opened her eyes and really looked at Christopher for the first time. What she saw made her gasp. He wasn't entirely human anymore. Parts of him seemed to be made of the same smoky substance as the spirits in his collection. And she could see chains, supernatural chains, connecting him to every cursed object he carried. You're trapped too, she whispered. Christopher's confident expression faltered for just a moment. What? You're bound to them just like the spirits. You can't stop collecting because the objects won't let you. You're as much a prisoner as anyone in your collection. Nonsense. I am in complete control. But Nina could see the truth now. The chains weren't just connecting Christopher to his artifacts. They were wrapped around him, binding him, feeding off him. He was as much a part of his collection as any ghost. When did you last try to throw one away? Nina asked. When did you last go a day without acquiring something new? Christopher's face went pale. I choose what to collect. No, you don't. They choose you. And they're killing you piece by piece. Nina reached out and grabbed the music box from Christopher's hands. The moment she touched it, she could feel Elena's presence. Not malevolent, but trapped and desperate. Elena, Nina whispered, you don't want to be here, do you? The spirit's response came as emotions rather than words. Loneliness, fear, and an overwhelming desire to rest. Then let go, Nina said. Stop holding on to the music box. Stop dancing. It's time to sleep. The music box grew warm in Nina's hands, then suddenly cold. A gentle breeze seemed to pass through the car, and Nina saw Elena one last time. A small girl with sad eyes who smiled and waved goodbye before fading away. The music box crumbled to dust in Nina's hands. Christopher screamed. One of the chains binding him had snapped, and where it broke, his body became slightly more solid, more human. What have you done? I freed her, Nina said. She reached for the marble containing Marcus. And now I'm going to free him. But as she touched the marble, she felt the weight of Marcus's despair, his terror at being trapped in such a small space. I can't, she whispered. He's too afraid to let go. Then he stays, Christopher said, but his voice was weaker now. No. Nina closed her eyes and extended her sensitivity, feeling for the connections between Christopher and his collection. There were hundreds of them, chains of supernatural binding holding spirits to objects and objects to their collector. She began to speak to each spirit individually, offering them the choice Elena had taken. Some were too afraid, too angry, or too attached to their earthly anchors. But others were ready to move on. One by one the chains began to break. Christopher aged years with each broken connection. His expensive clothes became threadbare, his skin grew wrinkled and spotted. "Stop," he pleaded. "You don't understand. Without the collection I'm nothing. I'm dead." "You're already dead," Nina said gently. "You died the first time you bound yourself to a cursed object. This is just letting you rest." When the last chain broke, Christopher crumbled to dust, just like the music box. The marble containing Marcus cracked and released a grateful spirit who whispered, "Thank you," before disappearing into whatever lay beyond. Nina found herself sitting alone in her car on a normal city street. The frozen world had returned to motion, though it was now nearly dawn. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from other drivers asking if she was okay. Apparently, she disappeared from the app for several hours. She never told anyone what had happened that night, but she did quit driving for Uber the next day. Sometimes, late at night, she still felt the sensitivity that had saved her life, a awareness of things that existed just beyond normal perception. But instead of running from it, she learned to use it to help spirits find peace. She never collected anything, though. Some gifts were too dangerous to keep. Danny had been driving the same route for 3 weeks straight, and it was starting to drive him crazy. Every night, same pickup location, the old Riverside Apartments. Same destination, 1247 Elm Street. Same passenger name, J. Morrison. Same time, exactly 11:43 p.m. At first, he'd been grateful for the consistency. Regular passengers meant steady income, and J. Morrison always tipped well, $50 in cash, every single ride. But something about the whole situation was beginning to unnerve him. For one thing, he'd never actually seen J. Morrison get into the car. The routine was always the same. Danny would pull up to the apartment complex and the backseat door would open and close. The car would settle slightly as if someone had gotten in, and a voice would say, 1247 Elm Street, please. Danny would check the rearview mirror, but the backseat always appeared empty. The first few times, he'd assumed J. Morrison was just sitting in a blind spot or maybe lying down. But after 3 weeks of identical rides, Danny was starting to suspect something more unsettling was going on. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Danny had decided to get answers. He arrived at the Riverside Apartments at 11:40 p.m., 3 minutes early, and positioned his car so he could watch the building entrance in his side mirror. The complex was old and run down, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Most of the apartments appeared to be vacant. At exactly 11:43 p.m., his phone pinged with the ride request. But Danny was watching the building and no one had come out. The backseat door opened anyway. Danny's heart started racing as the car settled under an invisible weight. In the rearview mirror, he could see the seat cushion compress as if someone were sitting on it, but there was no one there. 1247 Elm Street, please, came the familiar voice. It was male, middle-aged, with a slight southern accent. Actually, Danny said, his voice shakier than he'd intended, I need to ask you something first. Silence from the back seat. Are you dead? A soft chuckle. That's a hell of a question to ask a paying customer. It's just, I can't see you. I've never seen you. And this same ride every night for 3 weeks. You can't see me because you're not supposed to see me, the voice said. Most people can't. You're just giving me a ride, same as any other passenger. But why the same route every night? There was a long pause before J. Morrison answered. Because I'm trying to get home. But every time I get close, something goes wrong. The address changes. The house isn't there. Or I find myself back at that damn apartment building. Danny drove in silence for a few minutes, processing this information. What happened to you? Heart attack. 3 weeks ago, like I said. I was supposed to meet my daughter at 1247 Elm Street. Haven't seen her in 15 years, not since the divorce. She called me, said she wanted to reconcile. I was so excited, I was shaking when I called the first Uber. The first Uber? Yeah. You're not the first driver, Danny. There have been others. But they usually quit after a few rides. You're the first one who's stuck around this long. The first one who's tried to help. Danny felt a chill run down his spine. How do you know my name? I know a lot of things now. Being dead changes your perspective on information. They were approaching Elm Street now. Danny had driven this route so many times he could do it with his eyes closed. But tonight something felt different. "Turn left here," Jay Morrison said. "But we always go straight. 1247 Elm is straight ahead." "Not tonight. Turn left." Danny hesitated, then turned left onto a street he'd never noticed before. The houses here were older, more run-down than the usual neighborhood. Street lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. "Stop here," Jay Morrison said. Danny pulled over in front of a small, dark house. The number on the mailbox read 1247, but this definitely wasn't Elm Street. "This is it," Jay Morrison said, and Danny could hear the emotion in his voice. "This is where she lives now. My daughter. She moved after I died. I've been trying to find her for 3 weeks. But the app always said Elm Street. The app shows what I expected to see, what I hope to see. But you helped me realize that hope isn't always enough. Sometimes you need help from the living." Danny watched as the backseat door opened and the car lifted slightly. For just a moment, in the dim street light, he thought he could see the outline of a man walking toward the house. Then the figure faded away. His phone buzzed with a notification: "Trip completed. $50 tip received." But this time there was also a message: "Thank you for helping me find my way home. Jay Morrison." Danny sat in his car for a long time, staring at the dark house. A light came on in one of the windows and he could see 2 silhouettes embracing. Then the light went out and the street was quiet again. He never got another ride request from Jay Morrison. But sometimes, on quiet nights, Danny would drive past 1247 Elm Street, the original address. The house was always empty, with a "for sale" sign in the yard that never seemed to weather or fade. And he would think about the thin line between the living and the dead, and how sometimes all a lost soul needs is someone willing to take a different route. Marcus had been driving for Uber for 2 years, but he'd never experienced anything like this. It started on a foggy Tuesday night when he picked up a woman named Sarah from downtown. She was well-dressed, professional-looking, and seemed normal enough when she got in the car. "Hi," she said, settling into the back seat. "Thanks for picking me up so late." "No problem," Marcus replied, pulling away from the curb. "Where are we headed?" Sarah gave him an address in the suburbs, about a 30-minute drive. As they merged onto the highway, Marcus noticed the fog was getting thicker. Visibility was down to maybe 20 feet in front of the car. "Mind if I use the carpool lane?" Marcus asked. "It might be clearer." "Actually," Sarah said, "I'd prefer if you didn't." Something in her tone made Marcus glance in the rearview mirror. Sarah was staring out the window with an expression he couldn't quite read. Fear? Sadness? He decided not to press the issue and stayed in the regular lanes. The drive was mostly quiet after that. Sarah seemed lost in thought, occasionally giving directions when they reached exits. But as they got closer to their destination, Marcus noticed something odd in his mirrors. There were other cars following them. Not just 1 or 2, at least 6 vehicles, all maintaining the same distance behind them. At first, Marcus thought it was just highway traffic, but when he changed lanes, the other cars changed lanes too. When he slowed down, they slowed down. "Sarah," he said carefully, "do you know why those cars might be following us?" Sarah turned to look out the back window, and Marcus saw her face go pale. "Oh God," she whispered. "They found me." "Who found you? Should I call the police?" "No," Sarah said quickly. Just keep driving. Don't use the carpool lane no matter what happens." Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 3 months ago, I was driving home from work. Late night, just like this. There was an accident in the carpool lane, a pile-up involving 7 cars. I should have been in that lane. I always use the carpool lane. But that night, something made me stay in the regular traffic. That's good, right? You avoided the accident. 7 people died in that crash, Marcus. 7 people who might still be alive if I had been there instead of one of them. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That's not your fault. You couldn't have known. But I did know, Sarah interrupted. I had this feeling, this overwhelming urge to stay out of that lane. Like something was warning me. And I listened. I saved myself and let someone else die. The cars behind them were getting closer now. Marcus could see them more clearly through the fog. Older model vehicles, some with damage to their front ends and sides. The drivers were just silhouettes, but there was something wrong with the way they sat behind their steering wheels, too still, too rigid. Every night since then, Sarah continued, they've been following me. The people who died because I wasn't there. They want me to join them in the carpool lane. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. The dead can't drive cars. Can't they? Sarah asked. Look at them, Marcus. Really look. Against his better judgment, Marcus adjusted his rearview mirror to get a better look at the pursuing vehicles. What he saw made his blood run cold. The drivers weren't moving. They weren't breathing. Their hands were locked on their steering wheels, their faces were pale and lifeless, and their eyes were completely black. Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed. They can't hurt me as long as I stay out of the carpool lane, Sarah said. But they never stop following. Every night, every drive they're there. Waiting for me to slip up. Waiting for me to feel guilty enough to join them. The exit for Sarah's neighborhood was coming up fast. Marcus signaled and moved toward the off-ramp, but as he did, one of the pursuing cars suddenly accelerated and pulled alongside them. The driver, a middle-aged man with a crushed skull, turned to look directly at Marcus through the passenger window. Marcus screamed and jerked the wheel to the right, nearly sideswiping a guardrail. Stay calm, Sarah shouted. Just keep driving. Don't let them force you into the carpool lane. But the ghost cars were surrounding them now, boxing them in on all sides. Marcus could see the occupants clearly, a young woman with her neck bent at an impossible angle, an elderly man with his chest caved in, a teenager whose face was covered in blood and glass. They're not just after me anymore, Sarah said, her voice filled with horror. They want you to. You've seen them now. You're part of this. What do I do? Marcus asked, panic rising in his throat. Get off the highway. Now. Marcus saw the exit and yanked the wheel hard to the right, tires screaming as he took the off-ramp way too fast. Behind them, the ghost cars tried to follow, but something was wrong with their movements now. They were jerky, unnatural, like old film playing at the wrong speed. As soon as Marcus's car left the highway, the pursuing vehicles simply stopped. They sat motionless on the on-ramp, their drivers staring after them with those awful black eyes. Marcus pulled over in a gas station parking lot, his whole body shaking. What the hell just happened? Sarah was crying now. They can't leave the highway. They're trapped there in the place where they died. But anyone who sees them, anyone who knows about them, becomes part of it, Marcus finished. Sarah nodded. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. I couldn't take the bus anymore. They follow me there too, driving alongside. Uber was supposed to be safer. Marcus sat in silence for a moment, processing everything that had happened. Finally, he turned to face Sarah. How long have you been dead? Sarah's tears stopped. She looked up at him with surprise. What? You died in that accident, didn't you? That's why you feel so guilty. That's why they're following you. You're one of them. Sarah's appearance began to change. Her well-pressed clothes became torn and bloody. A piece of metal protruded from her chest. Her eyes turned black just like the others. I tried to get away, she whispered. I thought if I could just make it home one more time, but we never make it home, do we? We just keep driving, trying to find someone else to take our place in the carpool lane. Marcus looked in his rearview mirror and saw them, all 7 cars from the highway now sitting in the gas station parking lot behind him. Waiting. Choose, Marcus, Sarah said. Join us willingly or we'll follow you forever, just like I've been followed. Eventually you'll get tired of running. Eventually you'll want the peace that only the carpool lane can provide. Marcus looked at the ghost cars, then at Sarah, then at the highway on-ramp ahead of him. The carpool lane beckoned, empty and inviting in the fog. He started his engine. That's right, Sarah said softly. Just a quick merge. It's so much easier than running. But instead of heading toward the highway, Marcus threw the car in reverse and floored it, smashing through the line of ghost cars behind him. They exploded into mist and fog, their drivers screaming soundlessly as they dissolved. You can't run forever. Sarah shrieked as she too began to fade. We'll find you. We'll always find you. Marcus drove home a different way that night, avoiding highways altogether. He parked in his driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at his phone. He had 17 missed ride requests, all from passengers with the same pickup location, the carpool lane of the highway where 7 people had died 3 months ago. He deleted the Uber app and never drove for them again. But sometimes, on foggy nights, Marcus would see them in his mirrors, 7 cars following at a distance, their drivers patient and persistent, waiting for him to eventually choose the faster route home. He never used the carpool lane again. Elena had been driving the night shift for Uber for 6 months, and she thought she'd seen everything. Drunk college students, cheating spouses sneaking home at dawn, shift workers heading to their early morning jobs. But she'd never picked up anyone quite like the man who requested a ride at 3:17 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. The pickup location was outside St. Mary's Hospital, which wasn't unusual. Elena often got calls from there, doctors finishing their shifts, anxious family members, patients being discharged. But when she pulled up to the designated spot, she couldn't see anyone waiting. Her phone buzzed with a text, "I'm coming. Please wait." Elena sat in her car, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the rain. The hospital loomed above her, most of its windows dark except for a few on the upper floors. She was about to cancel the ride when the passenger door opened and a man slid into the seat beside her. "Sorry to keep you waiting," he said. "I'm Dr. Peterson." Elena glanced at him quickly. He was middle-aged, wearing scrubs and a white coat, with tired eyes and graying hair. He looked exactly like what she'd expect from a doctor finishing a long shift. "No problem," Elena said. "Where are we headed?" 1428 Oakwood Drive, Dr. Peterson replied. "Do you know where that is?" Elena input the address into her GPS. It was about 20 minutes away, in a quiet residential neighborhood. "Got it. Long shift tonight." Dr. Peterson rubbed his eyes. "The longest. Lost a patient on the operating table. Young girl, car accident. We worked on her for 4 hours, but..." He trailed off. "I'm sorry," Elena said, genuinely sympathetic. She'd heard similar stories from other medical professionals she'd driven. "That must be really hard." "It never gets easier," Dr. Peterson said quietly, "especially when you know you could have done more." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds being the rain and the soft hum of the car's engine. Elena occasionally glanced at Dr. Peterson in her peripheral vision. He sat very still, staring out the window at the dark streets passing by. As they entered the residential area, Elena noticed something odd. The neighborhood was completely dark. No street lights, no porch lights, no lights in any of the windows. It was as if the entire area had lost power. "Storm must have knocked out the electricity," Elena commented. "Something like that," Dr. Peterson agreed. Elena's GPS indicated they were approaching the destination, but as they turned onto Oakwood Drive, she felt a growing sense of unease. The street was lined with old houses, all of them clearly abandoned. Windows were boarded up, yards were overgrown with weeds, and several properties had condemned signs posted in front of them. "Are you sure this is the right address?" Elena asked. "This whole street looks empty." 1428, Dr. Peterson repeated. "Right there, the blue house." Elena pulled up in front of the house he indicated. It was in slightly better condition than its neighbors, but still obviously vacant. The front door hung open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. "Dr. Peterson," Elena said slowly, "I don't think anyone lives here." "I do," he said simply and opened the passenger door. As he stepped out of the car, Elena got her first clear look at him in the dome light. What she saw made her heart stop. Dr. Peterson's scrubs were soaked with blood. His white coat was torn and stained, and there was a huge gash across his throat that she somehow hadn't noticed before. "Wait," Elena called out, but he was already walking toward the house. She grabbed her phone and quickly Googled Dr. Peterson St. Mary's Hospital. The first result made her blood run cold. Dr. Marcus Peterson, 52, was found dead in his home at 1428 Oakwood Drive on Thursday morning. The veteran surgeon appeared to have taken his own life following a malpractice lawsuit filed by the family of Sarah Mitchell, an 18-year-old who died during emergency surgery last month. Peterson had been operating under the influence of alcohol at the time of Mitchell's death. Elena looked up from her phone. Dr. Peterson was standing in the doorway of the abandoned house, looking back at her. "Thank you for the ride," he called out. "Same time tomorrow?" Before Elena could respond, he disappeared into the darkness of the house. Elena sat frozen in her car for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, she put the car in drive and headed home, hands shaking on the steering wheel. She told herself it had been a coincidence. Someone playing a sick joke. Maybe an actor or someone having a mental breakdown who thought he was the dead doctor. But deep down she knew the truth. The next night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., her phone pinged with a ride request. The pickup location was St. Mary's Hospital. The passenger name was Dr. Peterson. Elena stared at the request for a long time, then declined it. Her phone immediately pinged again. Same time, same location, same passenger. She declined again. The requests kept coming, one after another, faster and faster. Elena tried turning off her phone, but somehow the notifications kept appearing on her screen. The app wouldn't close. The requests wouldn't stop. Finally, exhausted and desperate, Elena accepted the ride. She drove to the hospital, and there he was, waiting by the entrance. But this time when he got in the car, he looked different. His wounds were more severe. His clothes were more blood-stained. And his eyes were completely hollow, like looking into empty sockets. "Hello again," he said. "I was hoping you'd come back. What do you want from me?" Elena whispered. "Just a ride," Dr. Peterson said. "Every night. Forever. You see, I can't rest until I make amends for what I did. And the only way to make amends is to keep trying to get home. To keep reliving that last night, hoping that somehow, this time, I'll find a way to undo what I've done." "But you're dead. You killed yourself." "Did I?" Dr. Peterson asked. "Or did the guilt kill me? Or did Sarah Mitchell's ghost drag me into the afterlife? Does it matter? The result is the same. I'm trapped, and now so are you." Elena tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. The doors wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't roll down. "Every night," Dr. Peterson continued, "I get a ride from someone new. But they never come back. They're too scared, or they convince themselves it was a dream. But you came back. That means you're special. That means you can help me carry this burden." "I don't want to help you," Elena said desperately. "I just want to go home." "So do I," Dr. Peterson replied. "But some of us never get to go home again. Some of us just keep driving in circles, picking up passengers who remind us of our failures." The car suddenly roared to life, even though Elena hadn't touched the keys. The GPS screen lit up with their destination, 1428 Oakwood Drive. "Now you understand," Dr. Peterson said as they began to move. "Every night, same route, same guilt, same hope that this time will be different. Welcome to the night shift, Elena. Population: everyone who's ever made a mistake they can't forgive themselves for." Elena tried to grab the steering wheel, but her hands passed right through it. She was no longer driving. She was just a passenger, trapped in her own car with a dead man who would never stop needing rides to a home he could never reach. As they drove through the dark streets, Elena saw other cars, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all driving the same routes over and over again. All carrying passengers who had died with unfinished business. All searching for a destination they would never reach. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. "Trip completed. Please rate your ride experience." But Elena knew the trip would never really be completed. At 3:17 a.m. the next night, and every night after that, Dr. Peterson would need another ride home. And now, Elena would be there to give it to him. Forever and ever, on the night shift that never ends.